Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our session from the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium on finding and applying for jobs in higher education. This session is designed to help folks that are new to this industry, as well as folks that have worked in this industry before or looking to re-enter. So we're glad to have all of you here with us today. I'm Jessica Wise. I'm the co-executive director and director of programs with HERC. I'm also joined by Emma Brigette from CareerEco, and she's the one that's going to give us the tour of how best to utilize the platform that our job fairs are housed on. And then also on the phone, we have a couple other HERC team members, and then we also have some folks from the Military Spouses Employment Partnership. So there are a lot of people in the chat that can answer questions. So don't feel like you have to hold your questions to the end. Throw them in the chat. I may not see them, but my colleagues will. We want to make sure that this session is as useful as possible for the audience. So ask away. There's no questions that are off limits in this crowd. To give you a little bit of background, if you're not familiar with the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium, we work with job seekers to help them find and advance in their careers in higher education. And we work with our institutions of higher ed to make sure that their staff and faculty, they're finding folks from around the community as broadly as possible and bringing them into these wonderful careers in higher education and helping those folks advance in their careers. We like to say within this little group here that running a campus is much like running a military installation or a small city. Not only do you need educators, but you need people that work in the healthcare industry, accounting. We need lawyers. We need folks that work on HVAC systems. So you'll see some more of those jobs coming up, but it is a really wonderful industry to get to know, and we're glad that you're here with us today so that we can help you find that path. A quick overview of what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk a little bit about why to work in higher education. We're going to go through finding jobs in higher ed. And I want to put a little asterisk on that and on the next one, preparing your materials. These are, there's really just the basics in terms of how we want to do both of those things. And then there's a little tweak that we'll put at the end for higher education. It's almost like the rules apply, but more in higher ed. And you'll see what I mean as we go through those. Then we're going to turn it over to Emma, who's going to walk us through maximizing the virtual job fair and really get to know the platform a little bit, because we know all these sort of platforms are different and have their little quirks. Once you get to know the CareerEco platform, it's very easy to use. And Emma's great at kind of demystifying all the tech little bells and whistles that are there. So make sure that you definitely get used to the platform, which will maximize your experience. And then finally, I want to come back to this group and really open it up for Q&A, and I'd almost say like a working session. So again, as you have questions or you want to think about your materials, your path to careers, that would be a great time to talk about that together. All right, so we'll jump right in. So the why working in higher education, this is true for me and many of my colleagues that are here on the line with us. We were really drawn to higher education careers because of the potential impact of those careers. I was a first generation college student, and I know how much that environment really grew out what I knew of the world, and to be a part of that for future generations, whether it was directly with students or just the institution to be able to support that endeavor. That was what drew me. I know other folks that are drawn to the field because of their connection to the greater good in terms of research, but that impact part is such a wonderful piece of why so many of us have come to careers in higher education. There is also the real need of job security. So in many other industries, you might be bouncing around job to job, and there isn't sort of the same structure and security that you might have in a job in higher education. There are also great benefits and aspects of work-life balance. And that's not just the work-life part about it, but it's also being tapped into a community that's engaged, that might have exposure to the arts that you might not get otherwise. Lots of real benefits in terms of your life and your family's life. And then just to be in an environment that really values that professional development and that learning pathway is another great benefit for many of us who work in higher education. I'm sure there's more. And if you work in higher education, throw in what I missed here, throw that in the chat so everybody can learn from your experience as well. We talked a little bit about what kinds of jobs are available. This is just a little bit of a snapshot. I know that from our job board research, some of the ones that come up quite a bit for us are the health and wellness space. And then technology, which is something that people don't really think about, but when you go into it, there's a lot of potential, and that might not even be with an IT background per se, but maybe some IT familiarity and some customer service, because we know that we have a lot of frontline folks that can provide that, especially if you're coming in new to the industry or don't have a ton of background. That's a wonderful place to look as well. But you can see that it's across the board with all kinds of jobs that we're looking for in higher education. All right, pivoting a bit into applying, finding and applying for jobs in higher education. So what I'm going to do, I think, yeah, let's do this. I want to pause before I jump into this slide, and I want to see what your keywords are. What words are you using when you're looking for positions? If you just take a minute, I'm going to be quiet here and write those in the chat. And this is both an exercise to share amongst the group that's with us today, but it's also a chance for us to look at those words and kind of find the threads that might go throughout those. Take a moment. All right, Jerry, international transcript reviewer. Okay, so you are targeted. That's wonderful. Okay. Demita, I'd love to hear what more you mean from a professional. So we have some faculty, including adjuncts. Jennifer, I'd love to see what field you're looking for. We have assessment, marketing, student success coach. Oh, so we have a lot of higher ed folks on the call with us today. So thank you for putting that in there. Wonderful. Okay, great. Great. Thanks, everyone. All right. So what I'm not seeing there, and this is usually the biggest error that I see with folks that are applying to any jobs, be them higher education or what have you, is that we take the approach of kind of sending out a net. We have all these things that we've built up in our skill set, and we just cast it out there and say, what can that bring in? What sort of jobs can I get? How do I maximize the work-life flexibility and income based on these broad range of skills that I have? And that really makes the job search exhausting and I think less successful. So I want to flip that around. And I think a lot of you have done this already, given the keywords that I'm seeing in the chat. And I really want you to think about having 3 arrows in your quiver, 3 really honed ideas about the sorts of jobs that you want to get into. And I think you all are pretty close to that. And so today, hopefully we can just, fix up those arrows. And the way that we do that process of going from the net to those 3 arrows in your quiver is just to review multiple jobs out there and roles and types of institutions and all the things that we know about these positions and find those commonalities that really appeal to you in terms of where you want to grow your career, that map onto your skill sets, and that set you up for advancement in those areas. But the first thing you have to do is read a lot of job descriptions. And this applies whether you're earlier in your career or you're later in your career, that are mid-career and ready to make a pivot. We know that kind of cusp of like in your mid-career really is a determining factor for your long-term success and your earning power. So don't think that this is just an exercise for those early career folks. This is really important for all of us that are in our mid-career as well, because those decisions right now are really going to help you extend out the rest of your career in the most successful way possible based on your criteria. So we talked a little bit reviewing skills, and then from that process, and this is one of those processes that you're going to have the nuts and bolts, where it is, how much you're going to earn, what some of the structures and job functions are, required skills, gaps between what you have and what this has, the job requires. What are some transferable skills? But there's also a little bit of just that intuition. And I don't want folks to forget that as well. There's certain jobs that are going to speak to you. And I really want you to pay attention of the why. And part of that, and we'll talk about this a little later, is that there is a benefit in higher education, unlike many industries, not all, where the why does matter. That passion part of it is going to speak through, not just it's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. And that's going to make you a better candidate. It's going to make you present yourself in the most positive way. And it's going to see the connections of your skills to those positions. I am not watching the chat, so Jen, Marcia, Emma, if you see questions come through that I am missing, please let me know and I'll jump in there. I'm going to give you a little bit of a just something to do later after our session here today. I know many of you came to us through hercjobs.org, but if you don't have a job alert set up with Herc Jobs, I think that's a great way to start. Of course, you can also do this on LinkedIn or any platform. Just make sure that you get those keywords set up. I usually tell people to start with a lot, so 5, 6, 7, 8 keywords, and get those jobs sent to you. Real quick, you're going to be able to streamline that down to 3, 4, or 5 job alerts to make sure that you're looking at the right sorts of positions. So that's a really easy way that you set up your account, and then you can go in here and see your saved jobs or jobs alert. So we'll definitely encourage everyone to do that so that they can be getting that information. Now let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the considerations for higher education. This is where getting to know people, and we will talk later again about the informal interviews and things like that that might be helpful. Really thinking through, and for those folks that are on the phone or on the call with us today, they can add in the chat kind of what sort of institutions they worked at, bigger, smaller, private, public, whether it's a research-based institution that's more focused on that, let's say in the UC system in California, versus a teaching institution or a community college. Also looking at the department. So if you're in project management like Andrea, does it matter to you what area you're working in? So do you love the idea of getting grants for the institution? Project management in that department is going to look really different than project management, let's say in IT. It might not matter to you. Your passion might be really making sure that the systems and the processes run smoothly and that things are delivered on time, or you might be really interested in connecting with the department that you're working on and that you're serving that department. And then this is really important. You are a consumer of those institutions, just as, so again, moving away from the net to the arrow, really looking at those benefits, the culture of the institution. Do they have a history of supporting their staff? What is their mission and who do they serve? How do they interface with the community? All those are really important factors as you progress. You might not early in your career, you might not have the luxury to be as picky, and that's okay. But definitely be an observer at that point. If you get in, let's say, to a big institution, you realize I want to work somewhere that's a little bit smaller and there's more connectivity between people, then you can refine where you might want to work in the future. Pausing to see if any questions have come up. It doesn't look like it. So we're making good progress here. All right. Preparing your materials. And this is where if you do have your resume or your CV to the side, that's a great time to just kind of sit there, and I want you to circle some of the things that are on your resume that you could work on. We do try to practice what we preach. I do try to keep my CV and resume up to date. It's tough. But every time I look at it, I realize that there's something that I can improve. So even if you've kind of honed it in, I want you to still be critical of your own materials and really think about how you can elevate them. We talked a little bit about having that focus. And I think if you can review your resume, you probably have those 3 versions. So for your 3 arrows, but really make sure that everything within that resume is speaking to that goal. So if you have older job experiences, many of us have 20 plus years of experience, and at those early career opportunities may not be as relevant and really may not speak to the level that I'm looking for. So I can remove that from my resume. If folks want to understand the early part of my career, they're welcome to go to my LinkedIn or ask me that question, but really making sure that the information in there is the most relevant for those positions and that you're focusing on the roles in that position that are the most relevant. Keywords. This is another place we see that people kind of put the dog's breakfast forward rather than being very strategic about the words that they're using. And you have to remember that many of our institutions and all over HR, folks were using more and more of the scanning options within our applicant tracking systems. So those words are coming through, and you want to make sure that your words match up into the jobs that you're looking for. And again, that's where that knowledge comes from, reviewing all of those resumes. And then this part is real tough, especially for those of us that have worked in higher education, that it's a lot of process, and we don't always have a units or a dollar figure that we can add into our resumes. But I really want to push all of you to look at that and focus on the outcomes and the deliverables, kind of what was the result of your work. rather than what was the process. So again, I'm going to have you pull out, and some of this may not be totally accurate. That's okay. If you don't have your resume in front of you, I would love for you to put in the chat an example of how you've been able to talk about an outcome or a dollar figure or put something more tangible onto your job and onto your resume. And take a second so folks can look at the materials and think about that.
Jessica, we do have a question in the chat, or actually, we have a couple of questions coming in.
Great. Okay, let's pause there. Okay, so I see that Sherry asked, what if your most relevant experience is earlier in your career? Absolutely keep it in there. Then that should be the decider, less than the time frame. Now, you don't want too many gaps in your resumes, so be mindful of that, but there's always that balance. So if that experience is earlier in your career, and let's say it is, depending on what it is, if it's more than 5 years, in a few cases more than that, you really need to be able to demonstrate how you continued that knowledge build and that skill build throughout your career. So if there's ways to talk about it early in your career, and then you can emphasize that in what you talk about in the next position. And then importantly, we're going to talk about it in a moment, in your cover letter. So if you're going to tell that story and say, early in my career, I was exposed to X and I built, a foundation in this, blah, 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 blah. I explored this, but have always kept my roots in this and have stayed on top of the literature, have stayed part of the professional society, have applied it in my volunteer work. So I'm current in this thing. So it's fine if it's earlier on, but you really need to tell people then, how have you stayed on top of it? How has that skill not become or your knowledge of that area kind of become outdated? So if you have experience in financial aid from 10 years ago, the technology that was being used then is quite antiquated to what they're using now. So how have you stayed on top of what's happening in the financial aid circles, for example? That I have no idea if that applies to you, but really make sure that you use your cover letter to address that. And we'll talk about cover letters more later, but that's not an apology. It's just drawing the link between the dots. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the examples we're seeing here, and then I'll go back to the questions. Marcia, if you can help make sure I don't miss questions. So improvement in graduation rates and employment rates of students, that's perfect to really talk about that. And you could say contributed to through this, and then have the outcomes. Student evaluation, student enrollment, especially if you're in a recruitment position. And then so I love hear from Paul that really active language up front, the lead. I would want to read this more carefully, but this feels like a very big description. So make sure that this is the most critical piece that you want to talk to people about. Conducted and produced 6-hour-long edited interviews with creative professionals. Okay, so for your online course, that's great, Tyler, to really describe not just that you're conducting the course, but that you're producing those videos is wonderful. And then Jolanda asked, what if you did make difference, but you did make, but you don't have tangibles? That's valid. And I think you can also use that as a story, prepare that for your interview. It's a great opportunity to say, when I came in, we had an issue with culture in my department. And what I was able to contribute was, by the time I left, people actually sat down for lunch together once a week, and we didn't have that before. And it might not be something that's appropriate for your resume, but it's something that you can use in other places. So as much as possible, think about your skills, think about your tangibles, what you contributed, particularly where you took a lead role. And then those other pieces, save them for either the cover letter or the interview. Scrolling down here. Oh, I love develop and implemented. Those terms also get a little bit overused, Jerry. So just be really mindful if there's ways that you can kind of upgrade that language, especially if there's an outcome. And then the number of English learners over the course of the years. Okay, super. I love the percentage growth. Wonderful. Okay, great. And we can take more of a look at those later as well. So thank you, everybody, for being willing to share those and getting feedback. All right, moving on to crafting and compelling cover letter. So we talked about this briefly, but this is an important document, and I'm giving away the end, but in higher ed, your materials are looked at. They might be looked at through maybe not the hiring committee, maybe earlier on in the process, maybe through someone in the HR department, but your materials are looked at and reviewed and considered. So don't consider a cover letter a throwaway. When I was hiring in higher education, I read all those cover letters, and sometimes that was the first piece I read to understand the context of the job description. Um, and the cover letter allows you to tell that story, to really be able to point out your trajectory, your transferable skills. And this is the place also, and I'm going to give a nod to my military spouse folks out there on the phone, myself included, that our career paths are not always in a straight trajectory. And this is a really important opportunity to talk about. Because of my experience as a military spouse moving, I have developed skills in X, Y, or Z. So you can describe maybe some of the things that people might consider problem areas in your resume in unapologetic terms, but talking about how those might be assets for you as well. So being able to be scrappy and find solutions and get into these other situations and be able to be resilient in there. So it's not a sugarcoating. It's a really telling your story and being in charge of that narrative rather than letting your resume or the impression people get from your resume is telling that story. Okay. Looks like the last question that came in was about slides, and absolutely, we are more than happy to share that following the session. And now we get into the really uncomfortable area. So I want everybody to kind of like take a breath because this is the tough part, and all of us have experienced this. So you get your materials ready, you've honed in, you have your 3 arrows in your quiver, you know where you're headed now. And this is where the kind of brutal work starts to happen to be able to really strengthen your personal profile and brand. And you need to get in there, looked at your LinkedIn profile. People do look at LinkedIn profiles. Some schools don't, some schools do. But it's important as a way to, again, control the narrative of your story to make sure that you're aligning what you have out there as your skills and background with where you're moving towards in your career. It's also a great opportunity to look for ways to build skill sets or demonstrate ability. I think this goes back really nicely to the earlier question about things happening earlier in your career and how you might have stayed current or how you're brushing up on those skill sets. And there's a lot of free ways to do that as well. So looked at LinkedIn Learning. There's a lot of professional societies that provide wonderful training. Make sure that you're current and relevant in your field. And then those leadership roles. And this is a particularly important for my early career folks on the line, that really being able to show that you can step into those leadership or visible roles is very important. And we have to get out of our own way. Those experiences may not happen in your position, but they can happen in your personal life, in something in your community. It might be serving as in your professional society. You might not be ready to be a panelist, but you could be a moderator. And those are ways that you're really showing that you're growing your leadership skills, and folks get to know you as well. Oop, going too far forward. All right, so you have all those material. You got your resume, you got your CV or whatever you have there, you have your cover letter, you've really refined your LinkedIn profile. And Marshall, before I forget, can you put in the chat, can you find for me our LinkedIn resources on her jobs so folks can get a little bit more of a how-to on LinkedIn? That would be great. Thank you. And now we're expanding our networks. So this is where you have to get out there again and tap into both formal and informal networks. You have to lean into your mentors, and hopefully you've been building a very intentional mentor network. So that means that people that you can go to for critical feedback, people that you can go to that just make you feel positive. We need all kinds of mentors in our life. And so this is a chance to really lean into those. And then the final piece here is to ask for informational interviews. And this is really important if you're new to an industry, if you're looking to pivot, or you're looking to re-enter. And informational interviews are a pretty easy ask. And folks are really busy, but when they can, they will get on the phone with you for 15 minutes and talk to you about the position. And you can get so much great information and perspective on that the discomfort of asking is outweighed, 10 to 1 with the benefit of that 15-minute conversation. Okay, great. I'm going to pause there as I look. It looks like Sherry has a question. If my three arrows point in different direction, different types of jobs, and then how can I avoid wishy-washy LinkedIn profile that doesn't seem to stand for anything? Yeah, I think that that's a common problem. So what I would recommend is literally having your three versions of your resume. Sherry, I hope you have three versions of your resume. And really, this might be tough. But this is where, if it is drastically different, if you're not seeing commonalities, this is a tough talk to have with yourself. We use the like social media. I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. This is where you may need to refine what your priorities are. If they are wildly different pathways, I suspect there's one that speaks to you more, speaks to your skills more, that really is the one that stands out. There's zero commonality between the positions. You need to be brutal with yourself and say which is the one that's going to, put me on the right path. And that path is defined by you. It could be defined by, professional success. It could be defined by salary. It could be defined by anything that, any parameter that you want, but really being critical about that. You might have to go back to the beginning and review a lot of job descriptions within those three buckets and then make the determination. And then you can refine your LinkedIn profile. And I'm not saying throw away those other two, but that really becomes the lead. So you say, I'm an expert in accounting and I have 15 years in these areas. That's augmented by my, bup. And that could be, if it's what, let's just really go crazy here and say you decide accounting is the way you want to go, but you have an art history major as a background and a passion of yours. And so maybe what you want to talk about is that you want to provide the financial background in a space that supports budding artists. So you can find the story there, but you really need to have that narrative push and really double down on where your passion is. I know that's kind of a tough way to frame it. Okay, Yolanda, thank you for asking about the informational interviews. So the informational interviews are really putting yourself out there. So if you have your LinkedIn profile set up, you've probably looked at, or you should, look at people in the field that you're trying to, let's say you're trying to move into you've been in a more customer service space in IT and you want to go into more of a technical space in IT, and you've prepared yourself by taking on additional courses or learning a skill set and you're ready to make that pivot. So you might go into LinkedIn and find a hiring manager in that space, or better yet, a practitioner in that space that's at an institution that's maybe not your target institution, maybe down the road, but your target institution would be great. And give them a little bit of a background in it is hard to find email addresses these days. So I really encourage you to try to look at LinkedIn. And if you can't find their work emails. So you find that person, let's say they're working in your role or one or two roles above where you're looking for. And you can very easily say, I have a background in customer support within technology. I have built out these skills and I'm trying to understand the kind of next step for this position within IT. Yeah, and it might be a hiring manager. I'm more inclined to go to the subject matter expert or the technical person that you're like where you're looking to have your job. Maybe that equivalent, or again, a step up might have more perspective. So a step up or two would be a great target for you to reach out to. And just say, can I take 10 minutes of your time to ask you a few questions about the industry and your personal trajectory? This is also a space, as much as it might feel a little bit pandering, it's the reality. People like commonalities. So if you have if you have an alma mater that you both went to, use that. If you're both involved in the SPCA, talk about that. Say, I noticed you because of this, and I have a couple questions. Or do you know someone that would have a couple minutes to speak with me? It might be that you don't get a response right away and you may not get a response at all. So have a couple targets that you're looking for to be able to do that. A personal connection really matters. All right. All right, moving over to the application tips. So many of you have applied or are already in higher ed jobs. So this is old news to you. If you have additional tips for the group, please share them. The most important thing I want folks that are new to this field to remember is that the application process may take longer than the corporate environment. There are a lot of factors there. We don't need to go into them, but the timeline is longer, and that's just simply the reality. So you really think about that in your personal trajectory and what you need to be able to do and put into place ahead of time, especially let's say you know a contract's ending, you might need to start the application process a little bit earlier if higher ed is your target. We talked a little bit about how all materials matter. And it is true that things are read and looked at. And that also, this probably goes without saying, but because all materials are reviewed, you need to make sure that your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, everything looks crisp. There's no grammatical errors, and that's where pulling in your buddies is so important. I know there's AI tools around that, reading it out loud, another uncomfortable thing I'm asking you to do today. All those things really matter. Another note is that the interview process looks a little bit different. Sometimes you'll have a one-on-one hiring manager, and but many cases you'll actually have a panel format. A lot of those are now online, and especially in the first rounds, and that might feel a little different, and it might feel a little bit controlled, where it's person one, person two, person three, and they come back and rotate those questions. That's by design so that every candidate has the same experience or as close to the same experience as possible. It feels very artificial and you might feel a little bit rushed, but know that that's part of the process so that one, you have multiple perspectives on the candidate, but that each candidate has the same experience as much as possible. And then we talked about this a little bit before too, but it really connecting your experience with the mission of the institution and department is a really nice way, again, because it shows your passion, it shows your attention to detail, and it shows how you can contribute that might be above, beyond or parallel to your hard or soft skills. Okay, I think that's covering the bulk of what I wanted to say. And now I get to turn you over into the capable hands of Emma to take over the presentation, and then we'll come back here together to be able to go through maybe some examples or things that you want to work on as well. Jen, does Emma have sharing? I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll just make sure that Emma can get up on to the screen.
He's sending a request.
Perfect.
All right. This time we didn't even practice Jessica, and it worked out, and that's what you get. Alrighty. Just gonna zoom in a bit for you all. So the first screen that I have pulled up is just one of the upcoming higher ed events. So this is one of the three. They each have their own individual registration page where you will click the registration button, and then that will bring you to the login section. If you already have an account with CareerEco, you'll go ahead and just add your existing email address and password. And if you're new to the platform, you'll create an account, and then you can go ahead and log in and fill out the registration questions. And if you're already registered for the event, then your dashboard should look like this, although you'll see the HERC event listed here. I think I saw a question come through. I'm not sure if it was for what I'm going through right now.
No, just me sharing the link.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Thanks. So like I was saying, in your dashboard, one of the higher ed events, or all three, are going to be listed here. The first thing that the system will prompt you to kind of do is upload your resume. So if you haven't done so already, you can click here to upload your resume or any other pertinent documents, or you can do so by clicking on the profile button here next to your name. So if I just click on that, you'll see that this is my candidate's profile details. So any education information that I've listed during the registration process is going to show here. And then, like I said, I would upload a resume, or if I have a cover letter, I can add that under credentials, and other documents can be uploaded as well. So you just want to make sure that all of your personal information is updated and accurate, because employers are going to be viewing this ahead of time and then potentially scheduling one-on-one interviews with you. So just make sure everything is up to date ahead of the event. And oops, sorry about that. Let me just pause my screen here quickly. Okay. So then back on the main screen here, you'll also see that I have meeting invitations. So for this event, there's a few different options. You can join a generic group room, which I'll go into in a moment, but basically organizations will set up group rooms that you as the candidate can come in through freely throughout the duration of the event, and no scheduling is necessary. There's also the option in this event for organizations to send you an invite for you to schedule a meeting time with them. So this would be them going through your resume or looking at your registration questions, et cetera, to see if you meet any of the requirements for any of their open positions. And then some organizations will set up scheduled meeting times that they're available that you can slot into. So they won't invite you. It's up to you who you want to set up meeting times with. So that's kind of the difference between these two buttons here. This, you're getting a meeting invitation, and this shows you meeting slots available. So if I go ahead and I just click on meeting slots available, it's going to bring me to all of the exhibitors in the event. So I can see up here that I have a sponsor, and then below there are other exhibitors. If they have a schedule meeting button available here, this means that they have open slots that you can slot into. If you don't see this button within their organization profile, this means that either their meeting times are filled or they didn't create the candidate scheduling. So they may still have a group room for you to enter into. So just note that if you do see an organization that doesn't have any scheduled meetings open or available, or they haven't invited you to one, there's still the opportunity to engage with them in a group setting. Additionally, if let's say there's no meeting times available or they're all blocked, you can always go ahead and express interest in an organization. Organizations can view the list of candidates that have expressed interest and may be more likely to go ahead and invite you to one of those private meetings or do some sort of outreach. So if you are interested in the organization, I always mention that you should express interest in them. And then ahead of the event, in addition to being able to schedule meetings, you can view organization profiles. So if I click on Global Inc. here, I can see information about this company. I can view additional info, meaning the registration questions that they've completed on their end, any files that they've chosen to upload, which I can then download. And then you'll notice too that some may have a point of contact. So in this case, they've added an email address. So you could always reach out to these organizations as well if they've decided to include a point of contact. So there are various ways to get in touch with these organizations if you're unable to schedule a meeting for various reasons. So if I go back to the main page here, I just showed you the meeting slots that are available. Now I'm going to cover when an organization has sent you a meeting invite. So if I click on this arrow here, it's going to ask me if I want to schedule a meeting with Global Inc. And I was invited by Elizabeth Anderson for a position in higher education. When you get these invitations from organizations, you're also going to receive an email address. So you won't have to just always go in your dashboard to see if you've received any invitation. You're going to get an alert to your email, and then you can choose to log in to your account and schedule a meeting. You'll also note here that I can view the full profile of that organization as well. So let's say I want to go ahead and schedule a meeting time. I'm going to click on schedule. And then I'll see the open meeting time slots. So for the purpose of this training, I'm going to do 1 to 2. You'll see in your event that the max meeting time will likely be around 30 minutes. Orgs can do anywhere from 10, 15, 20, 30, etc., all the way up to an hour meeting times, but people typically allot them for 30 minutes at max. So I'm setting from 1 to 2. I'll click X. And now I have a scheduled meeting. All of my scheduled meetings are going to be reflected in this area here with this little calendar icon. So once I've gone ahead and I've gone through all my invitations from organizations, I can view my full schedule of meetings ahead of the event. So it's going to show me the time frame that I'm meeting with certain organizations. It will allow me to view their profile and click on more information. So again, the job that they're hiring for and the representative I'm meeting with. So just as a best practice, if you do have scheduled meetings, make sure you're doing your research ahead of time on the representative you're engaging with, on the company, on the job that they're recruiting for. When they're doing these one-on-one interviews, they're looking for a more interview-like style. So don't go in there unprepared. Make sure you're ready to answer questions and kind of have an in-depth conversation with these recruiters. And then also to prepare for the event, you can look at the job board. So if organizations have uploaded a job board, you'd click on the job board here and you're able to then see all of the positions that have been listed by each of the participating organizations. And everything on this page is filterable. So if you're looking for certain locations, whether or not it's full-time, part-time, title, etc., all of that is here for you to filter on and see more details. Okay. Any question on this kind of main dashboard page here? If not, I'll head into the event and kind of touch on the capabilities that you have there. All right. So on the day of the event, you're going to click the Join Event button. Okay. It lets me know that I have a meeting that is starting. So that is my scheduled meeting. So when you come in, all of your scheduled meetings are going to be listed here at the top. Before going in, you can select the devices that you're going to be utilizing, whether it's your audio or video. So make sure to have that prepared before going into these meeting rooms. And then all of the group rooms that organizations have added are going to be listed below. So these are the rooms that you didn't have to do any scheduled meetings for. You can kind of just freely go in and out, ask generic questions. Some of them might be having panels. It's really just kind of a free form. So for example, I'm going to join this higher ed positions room from Global Inc. And the moderators are going to be listed here at the top. So let me just get a moderator in the room. You guys can see. All right. So we have a recruiter in the room here, and then I'm listed down below, along with all other candidates that may be participating in this room. In this group room, you can engage in text chat, and then the representatives can also engage in text chat. So all of the messaging that takes place in this room is visible to everyone. Hello. So now we can see everything that's going on. It's important to note that in this group room, only organization representatives have the capability to use their audio, their video, or to screen share. So you're in a group room, you're just going to be engaging with this text chat. So or a lot of representatives might be on audio or video, and they'll be addressing questions as they come through in the chat. If you are able to engage or you go into a group room with an organization that maybe you were unable to schedule a pre-scheduled meeting with, either they were booked up or they didn't send you an invite, whatever it may be, if you join their group room, you can always initiate a private conversation with a representative that isn't scheduled. So let's say I really want a position at Global Inc. I'm going to reach out to Elizabeth Anderson in the room by starting a private conversation. And this one chose not to accept. So 1 second, let me make sure they're available. So that's a good point too, is when it's green, that means they are available for private chats, which most of them are. And if they're not, you'll see a little red dot there. But for this point, I'll go ahead, I'll start a private conversation. And you can see, I can still see everything that's taking place in this main room here, but I can also engage one-on-one with Elizabeth. Because Elizabeth and I are in a one-on-one setting, now I have the capability to utilize audio and video. And it's just me and Elizabeth in here. It's good to note that if you want to utilize audio or video, the representative is going to have to initiate it on their end. So I will go ahead and initiate it. And you'll notice I get a notification to accept. So I'm just going to start audio right now. And then what's going to happen, and it might be pulling from my, okay. So right now you can see that we're talking one-on-one. I'm just going to mute us. But this is what it looks like. This is the representative. She's uploaded a picture of herself. She's using audio, and this is myself here. I could always choose to use my video instead. So once that notification comes through, you'll choose to accept audio or video, and then you and the organization rep can engage one-on-one. And then whenever you're done having this one-on-one conversation or done using audio or video, just click this X down below. And you'll see that you're still in the private room, but you have stopped using your broadcasting. So none of this is timed here. You can engage as many one-on-one chats as you'd like simply by just clicking on the Start Private Conversation here. So a good way to utilize that feature if you're unable to schedule those group meeting or those one-on-one meeting rooms. You can also join up to 3 rooms at a time. So if there was a panel happening in one room or just kind of wanted to check out other rooms, you can always join other rooms, kind of see what's going on, and then toggle between the different rooms. A good utilization of that feature is, let's say you've joined the queue line. So this room has a queue, and that means you're joining a quote unquote virtual waitlist, which allows you and other candidates to get in this one-on-one line. And then once the representative has moved through that waitlist, they will invite you into their queue room. And again, you can talk with them one-on-one. Organizations tend to do this if their room is super busy and they're just trying to talk through as many candidates as possible and engage with them and get to know them. It's a little less strict than the pre-scheduled meetings where you're kind of doing more of an interview-like style. This is kind of just to talk one-on-one with candidates a little bit more freely. So if you're in that queue line and you see that you have 7 minutes, nothing's really going on in their group room at that moment, you can join another room. And then once that organization has invited you to the queue room, you'll get a notification in this room and you can then join that queue. So the queue is totally optional. If an organization has pre-scheduled meetings, they likely won't have a queue room set up. If they just have a group room, they may have a queue room set up. Just wanted to point out how you can best utilize the queue and then being able to join other rooms at the same time. Okay. And then we will go ahead and join my pre-scheduled meeting. So this meeting is from 1 to 2. If I had a meeting from 2 to 3, it would show below. It would show me the organization I'm meeting with and what we're meeting about. So I will go ahead and join this meeting. And again, I see the moderator at the top and then myself below. Again, because this is a one-on-one meeting, I can, as a candidate, utilize audio or video. Again, I just need to wait for the representative to initiate that audio or video conversation. It is important to note that these meetings are timed. So if you're running late for whatever reason, and let's say you get here at 2:02 instead of 1, you've missed your scheduled meeting time. You can always see if they have a group room and try to go into that group room and talk with a representative there. But it is good to just make sure you're paying attention to your schedule, make sure you're entering your meeting rooms at the specific time. Otherwise, you can, like I said, try to go into their group room or see if they have any other open meeting slots throughout the day. because you can schedule meetings throughout the day. So you'll notice that through each of these different kind of rooms, all of the settings are essentially the same. The layouts are the same. The difference being in the group room, you're not utilizing your camera and audio, but in any one-on-one setting that you have with a representative, you have the capability to utilize your audio and video. Okay. And then also on the day of the event, we will be available, our team. So for any reason you're having trouble utilizing your audio or video or need help with anything regarding the platform, you can click on this help button here and it will show our phone number and then our email address here. Our team will be able to resolve your question within 5 to 10 minutes. So if you're having issues, just make sure that you do reach out to our team and we're able to assist. And with that, I will stop and take questions if anyone has them. Marcia and team, if there's anything you want me to touch on, just let me know.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm just checking to see if there's any tech questions coming through here for this platform. There's a lot of capability here, and I think that's giving the overview, getting familiar with it is great, but getting in there yourself is going to make a big difference. Tyler, do you have a question for Emma or for me?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for this resource. This is awesome. I guess I've never done this before, and this is a great overview. I'm wondering if you could maybe articulate maybe the flow of a day. I saw for me, I'm in California, so 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Like what would kind of a nice flow or kind of the sequence of events look like, or a scenario, just to kind of understand the rhythm of how things move. I don't know if that makes sense, but grateful for any thoughts there.
Yeah, no, of course. Um, it's a bit dependent on how you've kind of set up your day as well. So there's flexibility with the organizations participating, and then there's flexibility with you as the candidate. So if you want to organize your day where you have back to back to back to back meetings, essentially with specific organizations that have job positions that you're looking for, you can absolutely do it that way. Or if you're really just interested in kind of learning about each of these organizations, what positions they may have, where you might fit in, etc., and then maybe initiate private chats if you want to get more in depth, you can do that. What I would say, and it will help you kind of figure out your layout for the day, but ahead of time, you'll want to go through each of the organizations that have registered for the event, take a look at their profile. You can filter on organizations in certain locations, certain positions that they're hiring for. So take a look at all those organizations, see what meets your needs, and then you can kind of build your day out around that.
Yeah, that's great. And you definitely won't need the full time, I don't think. You can kind of block in and like Emma was saying, see what time they're there, see what time you can get appointments, and then kind of bulk it around that time. We do know that it's really high. It tends to be, everything's a little, things are different, but we tend to have high attendance right at the beginning and then it kind of goes down. But the employers know that too, so they'll be more visible at the beginning. So really making sure that you kind of map out your day ahead of time is a great way to do it. And then our team also has an open room. So you're always welcome to bob back into that room if you have questions or need a little on the spot advice or go through anything to fill that time in between your sessions. I think that's a great question, Tyler. Thanks for bringing that up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if I may, one more question.
Okay.
So I have my CV, but I haven't really updated a one-page resume. Would you say that both would be good, or generally is a CV enough for uploading?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in two ways. One is that you don't really need a one-page version, in my opinion, in higher education. It's fine to have the extended version of the CV, but depending on the positions you're looking for, some will be appropriate for a CV, but you may also need a resume. So make sure that you have both of those versions ready to go, and your resume will be a little bit more condensed in a CV just naturally, because you think about a position where you might have 10 publications, you wouldn't add all of those to your resume. So that's the flex that you want to be able to have depending on what positions you're applying for. And it totally depends, where you're headed. And looking at what the job requirements are, the application requirements, when you look at the job description, that might help you figure that out as well. There are some resources on Herc Jobs, and Marcia, if you're able to find that quickly, or Jen, to be able to put in how to convert do you have both a CV and a resume, Tyler?
I have an updated CV, but I haven't really updated a one-page resume in a while. I have an old version, but I would need
Okay.
to update it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and don't be limited by a one pager. Like let it be a real resume. Don't don't truncate it so far. It may, in other industries, I know they ask for one pagers, but I almost feel like that would be kind of suspect in some of these job opportunities. So don't worry about having a longer one. I have this up here, and I want to make sure that I'm still looking at the chat because we're getting, oh, thanks. For folks that need to wrap up here. So you have the link to the registration for CareerEco. I did want to talk just really quickly and a little bit, Tyler, this ties into what you're asking about. So I think we did pretty good with it before. Getting up your profile. Emma went through all those steps. And then during the virtual career fair, if your group doesn't have one-on-one interviews, it's still very productive time to go in there and ask questions, get a sense of the culture, the benefits, what that person loves about working at that institution. This is your chance. We talked about informational interviews. That might be a chance to say, hey, I'm relocating to your area and want to, apply my, let's say, go back to project management skills in this space. Is there anyone from your team that could have a 10-minute, or could you recommend someone to have an informational interview for me? It's also a good time, especially if you have a good connection, to plan your follow-up. So can you reach out to them via LinkedIn? I saw that question come in. Absolutely. Please do connect with us via LinkedIn. If I have a chance, I'll put my profile in there, but I'm pretty easy to find. And make sure that you kind of build that out, because it's either any job search is going to be relationship based as well as kind of skill and materials based. There are a couple resources here that we'd love to share with you as we wrap up the last couple minutes here. I'm happy to stay on the line a little bit longer if there's a couple questions, but we want to thank you for spending your time with us today. And more importantly, just really stepping back and using this time to kind of think about what your next career steps are. There's a ton of information on Herc Jobs, but I know that the team on the call is also happy to help with folks. Many of us have had really fruitful and wonderful careers in higher ed. And if you're new to it, we hope you get to join us. If you're in it already, we hope that you got some ideas about how to advance your career to that next level. All right, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. We'll close it out here, but we also, again, we'll stay for a few more minutes to answer any last questions. Aurora, I see your question. Oh, no, it wasn't Aurora. I jumped too quickly. I think there was a question about Canada. So most of our employers are US based. And because of that, that happens to be our focus. Hopefully someday we'll move into Canada. But we can talk with you if there's other similar groups. I'll put my email in the chat and help you think through maybe some options to look for in Canada. Of course, all of our job seeker materials are open to all job seekers from all over the world, so that you don't have to, please come and use them. And then hopefully they'll help you when you apply to jobs to institutions in Canada. Oh, thanks, Jen. Apparently typing and talking I can't do. Wonderful. Thanks again, everyone. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we wrap up the last few minutes. Good luck, and we'll see you on the 27th.